Welcome back to Scotland. You're with Jonathan and Jennifer on Well Traveled Life, and you're on Eat, Stay, and Play, and we're at Craigmillar Castle. Craigmillar Castle lies just outside of Edinburgh. It's on a large plot of land and has views back to the city and has a fascinating history. The original tower house was built in the 1300s by the Preston family who owned the lands. It was later expanded to create a comfortable residence with gardens and pastures. But its real history is from the 1500s when Mary, Queen of Scots, sought refuge there after the murder of David Rizzio, who was her trusted advisor, and maybe something more. After the birth of her son, she suffered both mentally and physically. But more importantly, this is where the plot was hatched. The Craigmillar Bond to kill her husband, Lord Darnley. Join us as we tour the castle and tell the stories of this infamous Outlander filming location. The castle is an easy 15-minute drive from downtown Edinburgh. Managed by Historic Scotland. If you have a membership there, you'll get free entry. We have English Heritage, and with that we got half-price entry for the first year. If you're a English Heritage member for more than 2 years, it's a free entry. Otherwise, the entrance fee is just £8. And of course, there's a gift shop in the visitor center. We're going to tell you the story of Mary Queen of Scots, but like most stories at this time in the country, it all starts with Henry VIII.
His troops invaded this part of Scotland, and so in 1544, Craigmillar was set on fire by Henry VIII's men, along with a lot of our abbeys in South Scotland. Like last year, we went to some of those abbeys, so you could see what happened during it was called the rough wooing, when he couldn't get his way, and the marriage agreement between his son and the infant Mary Queen of Scots was broken off.
The grounds reached their peak of grandeur during the 1600s when the Gilmores owned the property. Our friend Justin from Share the Tea Travel will give us a little bit of history as we take our tour of the castle.
There's bits of it that are from the 17th century as well, because originally it belonged to the Prestons, and they had a very close royal connection with Mary Queen of Scots. She came here after her son was born to recover from illness, possibly mental illness. And later it passed into the hands of the Gilmore family, who renovated it and strengthened it. So,
the grounds, the towers, the stories, it all carries history. The trees that stand in the center of this castle area right in front of the tower are said to have been here even back when Mary Queen of Scots was here. If you aren't familiar with the story of Mary Queen of Scots, this is a good time to take a minute and fill in some of this history. She has one of the more tragic female histories in terms of British royalty. She is the daughter of James V of Scotland and was only 6 days old when her father died, and she inherited the throne, becoming queen at that age. When she was only 6 years old, she was sent to France to marry Francis, the King of France. They wed in the Cathedral of Notre Dame when she was just 15 years old. In return, Scotland was going to get France's aid in helping to get rid of the English from Scotland. So it was purely a political marriage for her. They had no children, and Francis died at the age of 16 after having been a sickly child. In order to produce an heir, Mary needed to marry again. And she met her cousin, Lord Darnley, after having been sort of evicted from France by her mother-in-law, Catherine of Medici. Unfortunately, once home in Scotland, Mary's life did not become much happier. Lord Darnley turned to drink. She refused to give him any power. He had a lot of ambition, and their marriage sort of fell apart. Which is where Craigmillar Castle comes into play. Mary had just given birth to her first and only son, James, who went on to become the King of Scotland upon her death and eventually the King of England. But let's get back to Mary for a moment. Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, Mary's husband, was intensely jealous of David Rizzio, who was not only her friend, but her private secretary. and he plotted with a number of Scots lords to kill Rizzio, which in fact happened. Mary was having dinner at Holyrood Place in her private area with some ladies-in-waiting and David Rizzio. She was 6 months pregnant, and her husband, Lord Darnley, walked into the room, accused her of adultery. There had been some question that perhaps Rizzio was the father of the child she was pregnant with. And while Mary was held at gunpoint, Rizzio was stabbed 56 times and died in front of her. Likely suffering from postpartum depression as well as fear and anxiety, she retreated to Craigmillar House to try and recuperate after giving birth to her son James. So let's look around the castle, and we'll be able to see some of where she likely stayed. I went in that door over there behind you, and you just come up the spiral stairs. And if you're a windy staircase lover, there's just a number of them all throughout the castle. Just watch your head, low-hanging bricks. The kitchen is fairly well preserved with its multiple fireplaces and ovens, built-in cupboards, little windows and hanging racks. The original slow cooker are these cauldrons where they would put meat in the bottom. It needed the longest time and the hottest temps, and then they would stack food on top of that, setting the scene for the grand feasts that would take place in the ballroom next door. Throughout the castle, you'll see balconies, arches, and ledges that lead from one area into another. The cellar is one of the largest areas of the castle. It would typically have been a 2-story room and used to store produce like vegetables and grains, which were often paid in rent. Let's head up another staircase to the room where Queen Mary stayed. It isn't certain whether Mary was in the room, present, or even aware of what became known as the Craigmillar Bond, where a number of her noblemen all conspired to rid her and Scotland of the tyrant that Lord Darnley had become. An assassination was planned while she was at the castle. We're just not sure if she knew about it. But it is interesting to note that one of the conspirators was James Hepburn, the Earl of Bothwell. We're going to get back to Mary's story in a second, but note that her chambers included a restroom. It would have been a bench with a hole with a chute that went down at a slant to keep things from going against the building. I'm not big on dates, but in February of 1567, Lord Darnley was indeed murdered. He was found strangled, and his house was blown up. And it was just 2 months later, in April of that same year, that Mary was reportedly kidnapped and raped by Lord Bothwell, who was trying to secure a marriage to Mary as well as the crown. But there's controversy about that because there has been some questioning that perhaps Mary was a willing partner in this, and it was not quite the violent kidnapping that had been claimed. To get up to the rooftop, just follow that windy staircase all the way around. You can stop off at each floor and visit different rooms within the castle, but this will get you up to the top where you can go to the roof. The marriage was controversial and ended up dividing the country. There was a growing rebellion, and he ended up fleeing to Norway and was arrested and lived the rest of his life imprisoned in Denmark. And things didn't get much better for Mary either. The tides were turning against her. It was not just the scandalous marriage to the Earl of Bothwell, but it was the fact that she was a Catholic in a growing Protestant nobility in Scotland. Also, her perceived close ties to France, because that's where she had grown up and her first husband was French, were not popular in Scotland at the time, and eventually, in July of that same year, she was forced to sign abdication documents that left the throne to her infant son, and she was imprisoned. Granted, it was kind of a cushy imprisonment. She was on house arrest in her own castle in Loch Leven. Her son was obviously not able to rule since he was barely 18 months old, and so it was her half-brother who acted as regent and ruled on behalf of her son. While imprisoned, Mary embraced her Catholic faith, which put her at odds with Elizabeth, the Queen of England, and her first cousin once removed. But Mary went to England seeking help from Elizabeth, which she did not get. Elizabeth saw her as a threat to the crown, which she was, and had her imprisoned indefinitely. During that imprisonment, there was a conspiracy to dethrone Elizabeth, and Mary was seen to be at, if not the center, at least involved. There were a number of secret letters plotting the assassination of Elizabeth, and Mary's signature was on those letters. Whether they were forged or not is uncertain, but it was enough proof that the law required that Mary be executed. Elizabeth, not wanting to be seen as killing a rival, was hesitant to sign the execution orders, but indeed she did, and after 19 years in prison, on February 8th of 1587, she was beheaded. Her son James quietly overtook the throne to Scotland, and Elizabeth continued to rule in England. James ended up becoming the king of both England and Scotland, so he's probably the only one who was a winner in this particular story. And there you have it, Mary's tragic story in less than 10 minutes. Now let's go play some games.
It paved the way for her son to become King of England, and that's what happened. When Queen Elizabeth died, James VI of Scots became the King of England and moved down to London. Yeah. He promised to come back every other year, but in his reign he only came back once, 14 years later. And we actually had a period of nearly 200 years where no monarch visited us, after Charles II, up to George IV.
Yeah, right.
So nobody bothered to come up.
Yeah.
Don your crowns, my friends. We are plotting a bond.
Murder most royal.
Oh,
200!
After our visit to Craigmillar, we went into the city of Edinburgh and enjoyed our time there. We have a number of videos from this beautiful city, and we would encourage you to watch all of our videos from Scotland, but we do have some specific ones from Edinburgh. We took the train from Glasgow to Edinburgh, and we'll teach you how to use the Scottish rail system. We also enjoyed tea at the Dome, which you can find on our Eat, Stay and Play channel, where we also have an overview of the city, including the Royal Mile, the Edinburgh Castle, Holyrood Palace, and other must-see sites. On our Brews and Views channel, we have a really great beer tasting from Brewhamia, which is right across the street from Waverley Station.